live stream. Yeah.
You're already streaming now? Or?
Yeah. Yeah. So start the webinar.
Can we start?
We'll take a couple of minutes. Is okay?
Yeah, sure.
But everyone can join in.
Yeah, let the participant enter the webinar and then we can start.
Good idea to close WhatsApp and Outlook and all, right? The background, they make noise.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Nandita, we can start now. We have got around 43 participants now. We can start. This number will increase.
Okay. So good morning and welcome to AMR Conversations. CCAMP is India's most exciting, vibrant and ever-growing life science innovation and entrepreneurship hub. And CARB-X is amongst the world's largest funders, not-for-profit organization, which funds early stage discovery of antibiotics and other life-saving AMR products like diagnostics. CCAMP is part of the CARB-X Global Accelerator Network, one of 6 organizations around the world to be part of the CARB-X Global Accelerator Network, and the only one outside of the United States and Europe, in fact, North America and Europe. AMR Conversations, CCAMP, we are presenting the AMR Conversations as part of the CARB-X GAN. The AMR Conversations is meant to be a public engagement platform where we will discuss topics, periodically discuss topics relevant in the AMR space. Before we begin, note from CARB-X, so CARB-X provides scientific and business expertise and support. They have 6 world-class global accelerators around the world, supporting the development of new antibiotics and other life-saving products to fight drug-resistant bacteria. A disclaimer, the content of this presentation is supported by CARB-X. CARB-X's funding is sponsored by the Cooperative Agreement number IDSEP 160030 from ASPR BARDA, and by awards from the Wellcome Trust, Germany's Federal Ministry of Education and Research, the UK Global Antimicrobial Resistance Innovation Fund, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The content is solely the responsibility of the authors and does not necessarily represent the official views of CARB-X or its funders. Today we begin the first of the AMR conversations, and we are indeed delighted to have stellar speakers with us. Will not say doctor because I think, okay, so Kavita Singh, who is Director South Asia, India at DNDi, Drug for Neglected Diseases Initiative. She was earlier the Director at National Biopharma Mission, NBM, which was part of IRAC. Program Director, Multiple Vaccines Development Program. She's been the Director, Business Development at Fortis Clinical Research Limited. Group Leader Medical Affairs and Clinical Research at Ranbaxy, and has done her MBBS from the Government Medical College, Patiala, and MD from the Postgraduate Institute of Medical Education and Research. Welcome, Kavita. Pleasure to have you here. A pioneer of sorts and a huge champion for AMR, or rather to tackle the global threat of AMR in India as well as globally. Anand Anandkumar is the CEO and MD of Bugworks, an Indo-US Australia biotech startup supported by CARB-X. Globally recognized as a key opinion leader in multiple platforms of AMR, India Biotech Association, GARD-P, AMR Industry Alliance, India AMR Declaration Trust, BioUS, and AMR member of the G20 Health Development Partnership. He earlier co-founded Cellworks, a pioneer in using modeling and simulation to support personalized cancer therapy. He has over 15 years of professional experience in the semiconductor industry before moving to the life science space. He is a BE in electronics and communications from the College of Engineering, Guindy, Anna University, and MS and PhD in electrical and biomedical engineering. From the George Washington University. Welcome, Dr. Anand. Always a pleasure to have you with us. Dr. Taslimarif Saiyed possibly has seen and mentored the largest number of life science startups in the life science and innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystem in India. He's the CEO and director of, can you change the slide? Somehow it's not changing for me.
Neither, I look better with Anand's picture. I'm fine.
So, CEO and director CCAMP. Taslim's initial training has been in neurosciences, where he received his PhD from Max Planck Institute for Brain Research, Germany, and followed it up by postdoctoral training at the University of California, UCSF, San Francisco. He also underwent training in management for biotech and innovation from QB3 and UC Santa Cruz, UC Berkeley. QB3, which is sort of a conglomeration of UC Santa Cruz, UC Berkeley, and UC San Francisco. As I said, he's actively involved in promoting innovation in the life sciences and healthcare space. His passion is working with startups and supporting innovation and supporting discoveries to commercialization. With this, I would like to welcome all of you who joined us, as well as our speakers, to what we look forward to very engaging AMR conversations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nanita. I think it's a great start. So if I may begin, just to build the conversation with us. So I think, first of all, morning, everyone who is joining from this geography, good morning. And it's very delighted to have you all with us. We have a really good gathering today for a Tuesday morning of sorts. If I may just add, and what Nandita just began as saying, that we all know the larger aspect of as a global health issue of AMR, the antimicrobial resistance. And CCAMP, as you saw, we have been engaging in several aspects to ensure that AMR impact or burden in India, collectively, how can we work to reduce that burden, and also bring down the projected numbers of the mortality that has been put forward by many efforts coming together. There's a lot, and for that we have put in together a convergent platform, which we call it as India AMR Innovation Hub. And while we do a lot of things, there are several new things that you can add up if, as we strongly believe that this issue, this aspect of AMR requires much more attention. Today is first of its kind, what we are launching together, a concept built by Nandita, what we call it as AMR Conversations, where we want to build dialogues on AMR, which would be a combination of, as one would say, the not only talk about the issues of AMR, but how we together can work towards addressing those issues, and also bring in much more how it impacts society from layperson dialogues and the language that we want to use. So conversations will be built with experts who will weave in the aspects of AMR, the challenges of AMR, the work to build innovations in AMR together. And then we'll put it forward to, engage with larger society per se. Today, we already have 75 odd people today, almost 75 people with us. And how we want to this second version, third version of conversation would allow us to build that momentum. And that is an effort. And that's the first day today that we are building it. So fantastic to have both Kavita and Anand with us, who are absolutely stunningly, capable of providing us those insights that we all would like to hear in next 40 odd minutes. We'll keep around 5 to 10 minutes of time for any query questions that the participants would have, which you should put it in the question answer box, Q&A box, please, not in the chat. Please put it in a Q&A box. So let's begin with that. If I may just set the context. We all know the larger aspect of AMR. We all understand that. I hope everyone, but AMR continues to be, and as the recent publication in Lancet, the numbers are staggeringly high to be possibly the biggest global health issue in front of us. WHO DG recently mentioned significant in his speech as he was getting into his next term, the importance of AMR and how we all need to come together to address the issue of AMR together. One thing that actually struck me was the numbers which came out for neonatal deaths through AMR. I think that was really something which was which possibly hit the most me, where we saw that very high numbers of neonates are losing lives if they are actually infected with resistant strains, in more so in LMICs, and when I'm talking about. And we can't let that happen. All of us who are largely very keen to fight this issue, I think we have to work very strongly now to build it down. And I think there are several aspects of AMR we need to keep on building towards to ensure that the danger that is looming large in front of us actually can be tackled. I'll not go into further detail because we have experts with us. So I will possibly begin first for their perspectives on AMR, what for them is AMR, and also let's bring in the aspect of India from the context, global and Indian context on AMR from them, and anything that you want to add in before we go on to details of some of the work that we want to discuss later on in terms of global partnerships, the opportunities, the challenges, and so on. So if I may begin with Kavita. Kavita, if you could begin with sharing your thoughts on AMR. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. And I believe you've set at the outset, the stage has been set up. And I'm sure AMR's relevance, importance, it needs in our segment, in our part of the world is adequately been understood. I'm hoping now, especially with the COVID backdrop of COVID, we don't need to remind ourselves repeatedly of AMR, the challenges it brings, but certainly what it means to all of us. And I'm sure Anand will talk about it much better, the intricacies he understands. But for me, it is overall a One Health problem. It is a problem which impacts not only human health, it impacts our environment, it impacts our animal health. So the steps or the corrective actions or the forward-looking strategy we need to build, we need to have to consider everything together. But somehow what, Taslim, just for the sake of the interest of the title we have today, maybe as we go forward, I limit my conversations towards human health and AMR. I will not touch too deep upon the environment strategies and the animal health strategies, which are equally or maybe more important than what our talk today would be. And maybe I'll hand over to Anand for that further conversation.
Thanks, Kavita. Anand?
Right. Thanks, Kavita. And thank you, Taslim, Nandita, and the CCAMP team. Most people here should know that Bugworks is based out of CCAMP. And I'm extremely, extremely thankful that CCAMP has taken AMR, basically taken the bull by its horns, as they say. And I really appreciate what you guys do. Just taking off from what Kavita said, for the ladies and gentlemen here in this audience, why are we speaking so much about AMR and it's almost in the news every single day? We have a huge problem. So it's important to understand the crux of this problem. A recent study came out that showed that 1.5 million people are dying per year with AMR and about 5 million indirect deaths to AMR, out of which around 35%, 1/3 of this mortality is happening in our country. Basically because of the abuse of antibiotics, because of how we dump our manufacturing waste into the water ecosystem, how we use antibiotics frivolously without doctor's prescription and without completing 5-6 days of course, etc. The use of antibiotics in poultry industry, in milk, etc., etc. You have basically exposed the enemy to the few bullets you have. There are only 5 classes of antibiotics since Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin in 1928, 5 or 6 classes. That's it. So you don't have new weapons, massive overuse, abuse of antibiotics, no new innovation, disaster. And the COVID has actually exacerbated this problem. Taslim, as you're very well aware, that many patients who died due to COVID in hospitals died because of bacterial secondary infection. You go in with a virus infection, the immune system is down, and you get the bacterial infection, antibiotics don't work. So we have lost antibiotics. And the latest ICMR data, ladies and gentlemen, that says many parts of India, for gram-negative bacteria like E. coli, Pseudomonas, Acinetobacter are seeing 60-70% resistance rates. This is staggering. So we have a big problem, but we can also find good solutions, which is why we have forums like this. So Taslim, I feel the appreciation for the background, and we don't need to delve this just on the problem. And then we focus on how various aspects of innovation from India can actually become solution providers. Actually, the world needs India today for AMR, just like the world needed India for vaccine manufacturing. I say this with utmost humility, that the world needs solutions from India because this is the worst battlefield. The weapons and military methods that you invent in the worst battlefield are usually applicable across the world. And that's how I look at AMR.
No, and a fantastic analogy, and I think a very important aspect you have brought in. I think an analogy of, the strength that India brought in terms of vaccine manufacturing, which has been going on for decades, and I think COVID was clearly demonstrated the importance of such a capability and capacity. I think could AMR be another possibly a global health area where India's response could be crucial, not only possibly in terms of the scale, but the expertise, the capability, the resources that we could provide to the world at large, the developers, the manufacturers, the diagnostic developers, therapeutic developers, and so on. It's something very interesting, and we should possibly look into that. Before I do that, I think I do realize that I think I didn't do justice enough about the introduction, of course, both CARB-P and Bugworks. So if I may, request Kavita to talk about CARB-P a bit briefly in their larger thing, the mandate they have, so that I can then build in a little bit after that, Anand, on Bugworks, so very little. So I think the participants who have joined today who may not know a little more about the organizations, they also can come in. Kavita, if I may request.
Sure. Thank you. It's extremely tough to talk after Anand has set the stage, but Introducing GARDP would be simpler. So it's, of course, it's the, just to give you the acronym, it's Global Antibiotic Research and Development Partnership, so GARDP. And it's, in fact, it's a daughter organization of DNDi and WHO. Together it was created in 2016. So the importance post the World Health Assembly, the importance to tackle AMR, to talk on different forums of health. And it's, of course, like a very similar any other product development partnership we are aware of. We are aware of IAVI, we are aware of TB Alliances. So it develops products in a virtual collaborative manner. So collaboration partnerships are the strength. And it's something which is trying to do very diligently is working on both aspects, the upstream and the downstream. And by upstream, of course, I mean, R&D, innovation. So collaborating with wonderful groups like Anand's group. But also ensuring what we usually miss out is the access component, and especially the access, sustainable, affordable access in the large 130, 140, the LMIC countries which we have, and which we have often seen that, the antibiotics which have been launched in the last decades or so have hardly a few of them, or maybe none at times, have been introduced in many countries. So they have really set out, and we have set out a very ambitious target of 5 by 25. And really keeping our fingers crossed, certainly trying to tie up with larger pharma biotechs to ensure availability as a downward spectrum. I mean, and what I call as the downstream of activities of GARDP. Maybe I'll just take a pause here because maybe at some time I'll also share what sort of observational and interventional studies have been happened or are planned or would be planned in future, just to give a brief on that later.
No, thanks, Kavita. Thanks for that brief. I think it was good to have people also know more on GARDP and its mandate. Thank you for that. Anand, quick, I know Bugworks has been a champion by itself. A very quick brief.
Very quickly, 2 minutes. Bugworks was started in CCAMP even before day one of Bugworks. From my previous company, Cellworks, we've been in CCAMP. So we owe a lot to CCAMP and that entire ecosystem. So Bugworks is trying to do something absolutely crazy. The last new novel antibiotic, broad spectrum, was the fluoroquinolones of the 1960s. There has been no new novel broad spectrum IV with oral. That's what Bugworks has set out to do as a company. We have a fantastic team. I'm very honored and fortunate to work with the team. I'm the only non-scientist in the gang. It's former ex-AstraZeneca folks. And we also bring in some modeling, simulation, engineering techniques into pharma, into creating this platform that has allowed us to build a new antibiotic. We have figured out how to evade the superbug. Our assets have been tested in about 10,000 superbugs across the world. And preclinically, happy to share with you all that we seem to clear pretty much every pathogen out there in gram-positive and gram-negative. We have a long way to go. Success is superbly elusive, and we are just crawling, maybe slightly getting up from a crawl right now. Our lead asset is going through phase 1 clinical trial in Australia. And if that is successful, which we will know by September, we hope to do a phase 2 next year. So long story short, Taslim, Kavita, everyone, if this is successful, we want to launch in India so we can potentially save lakhs of lives. Those babies you spoke about, neonatal sepsis, people we lose to pneumonia, to sepsis. This can be a fantastic antibiotic until the bacteria figures out how to break it. And then we will continue inventing the next generation after that.
No, absolutely, Anand. And there may not be a better wish to say, God willing, inshallah, than that. So
inshallah.
More power to that effort, to be honest, to have something such phenomenal deep science work coming out of India, saving lives for India and beyond. So, all power to you. We are all with Bugworks to do that. Okay. So continuing that thought. So now moving on. I think this is very good stage. And I wanted to just look at it from a perspective or from the title perspective. We are trying to now figure out that we have set the stage for the AMR per se. We understand the global threat. We also possibly know, all of us know that the cases of AMR in India possibly are underestimated in a way for various reasons. We know, maybe it's happening in most places around us. But what are for an innovator, for an entrepreneur who is trying to develop things from India, outside India, who's trying to build therapeutics for now in terms of what they want to do, or even diagnostics in some manner. What are the strengths that actually geography like India provides? What are those things that they think, okay, no, I should build up? You said something already about the battlefield analogy you had used, Anand. But if I may come to you, Anand, on this first, and say, what do you think are the strengths across value chain? Because, of course, the therapeutic approach doesn't begin with clinical research. It
Correct.
starts very early with the, the lab-based proof of concept. Then you actually
Yes.
do a lot of preclinical work, toxicology, and then you go on to do clinical and
Correct.
so on. So I think I'll come to you for your thoughts on that, Anand, and then I'll come to Kavita after that. Anand?
Yes. Thank you. Excellent question. And again, for the audience, all of us are on the same page in understanding that we want to prevent infection. We want to be able to diagnose infection. We want to be able to treat infection. There is no hierarchy in that. Prevention is better than cure. I'm a big believer in that. And in fact, we have spun out a company from Bugworks called Biomonitor in CCAMP to help prevent infection. And then there are other fantastic diagnostic companies in the country. So Taslim, all are important and all of them can benefit from India. And that's what you're asking a question, how we can benefit. So I want to be very specific. The talent pool of microbiologists, the talent pool of biochemists, the early talent pool of drug discovery folks in India is actually superb. We don't have very strong clinical development talent pool yet in when we do brand new therapeutics, Taslim. But in terms of preclinical, it's amazing. The ecosystem that we had in CCAMP, we set up labs in Narayana Hridayalaya, we set up lab in St. John's. So very early in our life, we had access to multi-drug resistant pathogens that our colleagues in Boston cannot even begin to dream of. So very quickly, the Bugworks assets were put on an acid test against multi-drug resistant pathogens and pan-drug resistant pathogens. And our confidence to build a company and move forward, Taslim, actually came about when we said, wait a minute, these terrible isolates that came from whichever patient, X1, X2, X3, none of the existing antibiotics are working and we're able to clear it, right? And we know we have a long way to go because it's preclinical to clinical translation is a huge landmine. But it is the access to hospitals, the access to clinicians who are suffering because they're losing patients to infection. Same thing, my counterparts in Boston have access to, Harvard, have to Mass General. But because of how the legal climate is in America, you can't gain access to samples. And doctors don't want to be disturbed because of how insurance and lawyers, that ecosystem is very complex in the US. Their funding ecosystem, go-to-market ecosystem is one generation ahead of us. But in early drug discovery, the ability to work with physicians who are saying, I'm losing patients. I'm happy a company like Bugworks is trying to break it. Success is very difficult, but they came and worked with us. So access to pathogens, access to clinicians, and access to really wonderful companies like Syngene, Advenus, Terra Index, all inside Bangalore. Can you believe it? All inside Bangalore. So most of our discovery work and early preclinical development work we were able to get done from here itself. So I will stop there just because I want to pause there and let Kavita speak and we can come back to it later. So the Indian ecosystem was very supportive. Now, if DBT, BIRAC, government of Karnataka had not set up incubators like CCAMP, we could not have even started. So we should appreciate that the basic accelerators or incubator availability, on top of that, doctors willing to work with us, on top of the laboratories that you can set up to gain access to microbes has been phenomenal. Clinical, bigger challenges, but I'm focusing on preclinical for now. So that is the battlefield that I was alluding to.
Thank you, Anand. And I think very interesting insights, and early access to the pathogens that you are trying to target. So your candidates early on can be tested very early, and then you can build on to that. That's a very important component. And of course, the ecosystem supporters like DBT, BIRAC, then there's Niti Aayog, DST, and CARB-X, which is supporting CCAMP as well, have been really phenomenal in terms of making those platforms for the companies to build upon and go from there. And funding, they have been funding.
Exactly. I'm so sorry before Kavita comes in. I'm remiss in not mentioning that one of the biggest reasons we were able to do that preclinical work and move to clinical is CARB-X. They are the foundation of our company, to be honest. And then CARB-X with CCAMP that whole coming together is the ecosystem I was alluding to. So I was remiss in not mentioning that. Thank you, Tasli.
Yeah, thank you. So now I go to Kavita for her inputs on still, I think Anand has mentioned a few positives in terms of the ecosystem, the access to resources, the players, funders, and so on. Kavita, if you can add a few, why do you think India can bring about strengths which can be attractive for innovators from India and outside to work in India and build their value chain in terms of across the value chain for the therapeutic development that they would be attempting to do?
So maybe the two things, Taslim, if it's okay. One is, of course, it's very nice to highlight this wonderful strengths which have allowed some of our innovator groups to move so far ahead already. But maybe none of them has really reached the stage where they're in a real strength. I would not even call it a strength. It's just we are sufferers actually because of this high incidence of the AMR which is occurring. So if you see the study designs and if you see the type of study designs which an antimicrobial any compound needs to go, it's a very phased development, and usually most of them do try to if you see internationally because of the absence of these many resistance pathogens, they do go in for a non-inferiority with a narrow margins or wide margins. They go for those studies because they do not have access to patients. They usually do the usual drug resistance infections, but a real test of the case, what there's a real soundproof test of your a good study design with a robust plan with an adequate, well-powered sample size is possible in this part of the world. I will not only say India, but I will say in this part of the world, South Asia, Southeast Asia, which is seeing such high incidence, which is losing patients. So there is an adequate case to both for the early drug discovery, early development, and the late development. So, you see that continued spectrum of completion possible. There's some things I would certainly like to add, as which should be, because it's a continuous spectrum. There's some things, if they can be added to this continuous spectrum, it makes the case, it really adds cherry to the cake. And one of it I would like to say is our strengths in translational research, our understanding and, deep diving into the PK/PD modeling. Our PK/PD modeling strengths, we would love to add something over there. I would love to even, see proactively some policy on stewardships coming up. I don't want the innovators to run away thinking that my drug for tomorrow has the full potential of being misused. So if some couple or 2 or 3 more components, a national action plan with a clear-cut ownership responsibility, there's some of those small gaps can also be plugged. We certainly are in a situation to lead and guide also the global development of many such products. I think I'll stop here, Taslim.
Yeah, no, thanks, Kavita. You actually possibly, in a way, led me to the next point. So while we bring together the strengths, what are the things that we believe that could add more value if they are worked upon? A clear, very strategic national action plan implementation is a very crucial with clear deliverable, clear assessment criteria, and even a midterm assessment for the same, and not waiting for 5 years to happen. There are a lot of things could be done on the national action plan. You also probably talked about the other aspects of facilitating it, including if I bring in the the gorilla in the room, talk about the regulatory aspect. How do we actually look at that? That what is happening there? What is there something that people should be scared of? Is it still the black box? Is it improved after COVID times? Or possibly even one could talk about the across the what one would say the institutional ability to do translation research in conjunction with what one would call as industry, how that is going to help out in a larger thing. And I think all 3 points are important, but I'll come to Anand to take that aspect. Where do you think we could work together to improve India's strengths to support innovators building the new therapeutics for AMR and so on? Yeah. You're on mute, Anand.
I said, I'm glad we started with the positive stuff, but it's also important, as you correctly said, to step back and look at which areas. And Kavita already hit on a very important area. I'm going to make 5 or 6 key points, Taslim, but also talk about how we're making improvements in those areas. Number 1, If our stewardship laws don't improve, it's game over. Any new drug or any new therapy that's introduced in India will be dead in 5 years because of abuse, misuse, combinations that are not approved, etc. Piperacillin, tizobactam, in 7 years we lost it. Linezolid, within 2 years we started getting resistance. It's staggering. So we need laws that are as strict as opium to get new antibiotics, so that you and I can't walk to our neighborhood pharma store, take it for 2 days, stop, that kind of nonsense. So stewardship, absolutely important. Countries looking at it seriously. Ladies and gentlemen, you'll be happy to know in 2019, we passed a law preventing the use of colistin in poultry. Colistin is the last resort drug, which is a horrible drug from the 1950s with tremendous kidney nephrotoxic damage, but it's the last resort. How well that law is implemented, I don't know. It's probably 50-50, but at least the government is waking up to such realities. Number two, you mentioned this, Taslim, National Action Plan. We need a very strong National Action Plan. We do not have a strong National Action Plan because it needs an owner. And some of us are begging and hoping that somebody like Niti Aayog, along with the Ministry of Health, will put a strong person in Delhi to own the National Action Plan. Otherwise, it is just a beautiful document that gets released over chai and samosa and goes nowhere. So we need a National Action Plan with the joint ownership of Niti Aayog and Ministry of Health. Why Niti Aayog? Because AMR can destroy India's economy. Lives and livelihoods are directly connected to AMR. So Niti Aayog is very interested in lives and livelihoods, Ministry of Health for obvious reasons. So National Action Plan ownership and drivers too. Three, the regulatory ecosystem is also just starting to happen now, Taslim, and Kavita would know this really well. The regulators are trying to come out with new methods. We have to appreciate what our regulators did for vaccines, with Covaxin and a few other new vaccines. Hopefully those lessons will come over to novel antibiotics and help accelerate, without giving up safety, help accelerate pathways for novel anti-infectives. Taslim, you'll be happy to know that the regulator has actually passed a rule that says if we have approval in all of these countries, automatic approval in India. If you do clinical trials in India, if your phase 2 is successful, we may give you a limited approval to launch in India while you complete your phase 3. How well these things are implemented and whether CDSCO has got enough staff who understand AMR from a regulatory paradigm perspective, we don't know. But at least the thought process is starting to create in the narrative. The last point I want to make is the biggest frustration that destroys AMR ecosystem in our country is lack of funding. This is just the honest truth. Whether it is Bugworks, whoever, we're all global beggars because it's so difficult to find funding and be able to do novel work here. So unless the government, along with VCs, has a public-private partnership pool of 1,000 to 2,000 crores to fund diagnostics, devices, and drug discovery, it's going to be very hard because the global money is also very limited for drug discovery. So these are some of my points. We are making progress in some areas. In regulation, I would like to see better progress. In National Action Plan implementation, I would like to see better progress. And in the public-private funding pools coming together, we would like to see better progress.
Thank you, Anand. I think collectively, very, very important points. If I may just shift the conversation to a little bit late in the value chain and go towards clinical research. Clinical research, clinical trial, clinical studies have had its, in India have had its ups and downs. It has been a roller coaster, as we know. If one says that it is possibly the worst affected geography, one of the first of it, and hence the difficult battlefield and possibly the right place to build your arsenal. How does that build into an Indian or a global effort to work with hospitals here to actually build what one would call it as a clinical studies with them, either as an early, I would say, the validation studies, or if one wants to call it clinical trials. How does that look for now? Where do we stand there? What we can provide, I definitely understand, and I would not say that the access to the nastiest of the bugs early on is definitely there. The hospitals are forthcoming. the most hospitals we have spoken to, Anand and Kavita, I'm sure you have, they all have AMR emphasis now. They all want to contribute to AMR. It's a very, very, I think good to and heartening to hear that all of them have a dedicated AMR person who not only attempts to bring down the AMR burden in the hospital, but also want to work now with the scientists to ensure that collectively we could have new development on AMR, be it on diagnostics or in the therapeutic version. So Kavita, if I may come to you on that, where do you see from a clinical research perspective, be it clinical studies or trial, where do we stand, and where are the challenges and positives to support in therapeutic efforts largely for in the space of clinical research from India?
Okay, yeah, so we're really touching the core of our discussion we've been. Let me stagger into two major buckets of response, if that's okay, and I'll not take much time. One is a standard clinical research operational requirement, the buckets of do you have trained manpower, which Anand alluded to, do you have the trained people, the CRAs, the CRCs, the PIs, co-PIs, statisticians. So do we have them? Yes, we have them. Do we have adequate number of accredited hospitals? We have them. Do we have the NABL diagnostic labs? We have 1,300 plus diagnostic labs. Do we have ethics committees? We have 100 plus ethics committees registered with CDSCO. That's a huge number. We never had them a few years back, just a few years back. But so our mechanisms, our regulatory, Anand also referred to it, our regulatory approval timelines, the way our regulatory discusses issues, it's not only, the timelines, it is their openness to discuss study designs. All that is extremely favorable. But certainly there are some challenges which are very unique to AMR, because we are talking a little more about AMR. Conduct of trials in AMR as such is challenging. And I'm sure, many of you would understand that very easily because we have been doing majorly trials of chronic diseases. Oncology has been a big bedrock. India has been, hosting a lot of oncology trials. So those are trials which are simpler to do. You don't lose patients in a day. You can have the whole process of informed consent process, or the what we call the pre-enrollment activities which need to be done. You have adequate time for that. Here is a special experience of required that you have a patient who is going to deteriorate very fast, who is going to lose his delirium very soon, who may not be in a position to give his informed consent. How do you enroll such patients? How do you don't have the lab diagnostics of which is the antibiotic, which is the agent, which is the microbe, which is infecting, is it sensitive, is it is resistance pattern, and you already need to start an empiric drug. And then, you may have data which tomorrow you've already started an empiric drug which may be effective over the pathogen, but you have a test drug whose analysis you need to do. So there, like this, there is concomitant therapy. Then our diagnostics, we might be having excellent diagnostic in the tertiary care centers, but I often visit Bihar, often visit Jharkhand, where we have burden, but we certainly don't have the diagnostics to get the people in. We see a lot of mortality in such patients, So our ethics committee today, are they really tuned to see so much of mortality and test of a new drug, what their response will be? Our media usually has not been kind to us, but I would say the best thing COVID did was get a kinder media, get a kinder social digital media towards clinical research people. That's certainly a very positive thing which has happened because of COVID. I would say the phase trials have become bedroom talks, which we never saw before. They are dining table, they are the conversation on the dining tables now. So those are the pluses, but we certainly need to get our hand, I will not say dirty, we need to get our hands dipped into these unique special trials, special indication trials, neonatal sepsis trials. How do we do PKPD neonatal sepsis trials? So there's a lot of learning for us, which I'm sure will happen with time, with the right mindset. I hope I could answer your ask, Taslim.
No, thank you. No, absolutely. If I may have just a follow on that. So what I wanted to say is that is good. So let's say if an innovator or an entrepreneur or a startup which has managed to get to the levels of early preclinical and want to shape up their clinical studies, according to you, what are the places they should look up to start sketching their plans for clinical studies? Consider them that they possibly, of course, they have several players to go to, but what is your suggestion? Where should they look towards as first dialogues, as they start sketching, where should I do, what scale I should do, which are the best hospitals? Kavita, and then I'll come to Anand with on that.
So I wish we had an established clinical trial network sponsored by the government. You know, if you remember, Taslim, under the Biobanks mission, there was a sponsoring of a lot of clinical trial networks, but AMR was not one of them for sure. Yeah. What it allowed pooling of intellect. It allowed harmonization between the sites, which is an extremely critical ask. But despite saying that we don't have a network, there are a lot of efforts, global efforts, which are happening. And maybe there would be a right time, and the team in the government corridors, there might be also a good time to start the discussions of either we integrate the existing network, you know, build on their existing capacity to do AMR. But even today, if we say we do have a lot, like within, I did mention, you know, from GATP side, we've done quite a few studies, or we're doing at least observational and hoping to convert these observational into interventional after doing the site feasibility. There's sites like CMC Vellore, PGI Chandigarh, Gangaram Hospital, Delhi, Hinduja Hospital, Mumbai, Manipal. There are a lot of quite a few, Lady Harding, where you have these right combinations of physicians and the micro, because you need both the strengths for this sort of a trial. You need a very strong microbiological lab support, along with the if suppose it's a tertiary, it's for an ICU patient, then you need access to that sort of population, and physicians who understand AMR, who have been at least a part of few studies before. So you might want to be wise in choosing a little experienced site in the beginning, especially, and maybe go bolder a little later in your later phase 3 trials.
No, that's very, very helpful. I think that's absolutely a very insightful thing, and I hope the innovators and researchers who are with us today, are listening in very carefully, because there is definitely an absence of a network, a centralized place for people to land in and move forward, and something that I think we should argue about. But coming to Anand, where do you think how we could support more? What are the strengths that we have for people to engage at the clinical research? It doesn't need to be clinical trial always. It can be a clinical research, right? Clinical study to early validation, something that Bugworks has done extensively with, if I'm not wrong, hospital like Marana, St. John's, and so on. And this gave you the required confidence on your molecules, but also the data that you actually could take forward for the submission of IND and so on. So very important, those are very important parts. We are not only talking about clinical trials, but clinical research and something else with that. Anand, where do you think this where do you think we have the strengths? Hospitals, some of the hospitals Kavita has mentioned, but is there something that you could add on top of what we just heard?
Sure. I think Kavita's given the framework so beautifully, name the hospitals, what they're strong for, etc. But Taslim, at least 3 questions have come in the 2 questions, sorry, to me on the Q&A on why we went to Australia. So I'll sort of answer all of this together, because our live example should say what works, what does it work, right? So I think in India, the preclinical story is very strong now. Taslim, in fact, we can do everything. We can even do GLP talks and get everything done in India, except for a few key cardiac studies. You have to go out to France. And I tell every innovator who's listening here, don't think of just one country. Go to whichever country has got the best expertise and do it. We work with 8 countries, probably 200 consultants around the world. So we tap the best possible expertise, if possible, number 1. Number 2, the reason we didn't do phase 1 in India, Taslim, is phase 1 is a different animal. You're taking a brand new molecule, novel class of antibiotic, never seen in man. It needs to go to centers that are focused in phase 1. So for the audience who are listening here, a phase 1 is a safety, tolerability, PK type of study. It's not looking at whether your drug works. It wants to ensure that your drug is safe, doesn't cause harm. is tolerable, and has got the right PK characteristics that you think it has. These are very detailed ICU-like environments. You wouldn't believe it, where we do it in Adelaide, Australia. They run thousands of trials, and there are doctors and clinicians and pharmacists who only run clinical trials. I would not be able to find a hospital in India because our doctors are so busy morning to night doing great work, saving our people. And you don't have the luxury of saying, I need to take a doctor from this hospital to work on a phase 1. So today, I don't think India is still ready for phase 1 trial. And I'll be very honest with you, Taslim. I also don't want to get slammed with some NGO or some media saying that invented in India, they're treating Indians like guinea pigs. Honestly, didn't want to deal with that nonsense. So we said we'll go get our safety done outside and come to India when it has been ascertained that it's safe. I want to be extremely honest about it. So phase 1 units is an area India could develop. But Taslim, even if you don't do a good job in phase 1, phase 2 and phase 3 can become our forte for AMR because we have the toughest patients here. My peers will have to wait 6 months to find a multi-drug resistant Acinetobacter or a pan-drug resistant Pseudomonas patient. Here we can recruit relatively faster. The challenge will be if you have inclusion-exclusion criteria that says patients should not have been on antibiotics 30 days before the trial. It's very hard to find because everybody's on antibiotics. So although you have the patient base, when you go to select your cohort to do the trial, you'll have lots of complexities because comorbidity, they're on statin, they're on antibiotics, etc., etc. So long story short, I think we have the patient population. If we work with those even 7 to 10 hospitals that Kavita mentioned, that GARDP and ICMR and others are working on, we need to showcase, Taslim, that at least those 7 or 8 hospitals have done world-class clinical trial, phase 2 and phase 3. And the data from India was accepted by US FDA or EMA or PMDA in Japan. That's called data harmonization. The moment we conduct even 1 to 2 trials in the sites Kavita mentioned, and that data on multi-drug resistant patients is tick-boxed by US FDA, that is going to be our turnaround, Taslim. Until then, there is still a fear that you have the patients, but your quality of data, will it be world-class? Can it be harmonized with other regions? We're getting there. I see the next 12 to 18 months, because of the work done by GARDP, ICMR, Wellcome Trust, this is going to happen. So I am really excited about the next 12 to 18 months when at least 6 to 7 good hospital units can produce world-class data on hard to treat patients. Taslim, when that happens, other innovators will then start coming to India to do trials. So this 12 to 18 months, I hope, plus support from regulators coming out of the COVID experience, I'm actually quite positive.
Thank you. I think that's very, I think insightful. Again, I would say, see, the aspect of the access to the, the nastiest of the infections, which does people want to test their antibiotics on. And also at the same time, let's say even for diagnostics aspects, for them to, validate their either genetic or AST linked diagnostics, that access to collaborate with hospitals, either through the study or the trial, it remains very, very vital to the entire story. And, I'm sure with more work done being here, something that you mentioned very clearly, data harmonization, where the quality and the format and the template of the data that is produced here is around the same template that is being used across the regulatory agencies. And it allows them to use it, from different pockets and doesn't really take away the strength of the data. I think those are the critical points to happen. And I'm sure there are significant places to go to. There are hospitals, there are clinical research organizations which support those, and we have many, we would not name, but there are many who actually support those, as well as I think working with the places like ICMR is one way to actually look into. So there are definitely positives. The very important thing is that there are many such efforts in terms of doing such clinical studies, clinical research, and clinical trials are coming towards. We all know about at least 10 that we know today, all of us together, which is going towards it. And that is something we have to support for next 1 and 2 years to build that confidence in the system. So the next rounds will be much more easier. I'll stop here, but
I just want to make one addition is our infectious diseases doctors in India are second to none in the world. The tough patients they see morning to night, hundreds of patients, multi-drug resistant patients. Nowhere else in the world can you get physician excellence. I'm not saying they'll be good in conducting a trial, Taslim, but just the physician excellence, clinical intelligence is second to none. So I'm actually excited about the 12 to 18 month period where these clinical trial networks and our physicians are all coming together. It can be a fantastic synergistic combination, right? Because our doctors understand the usage patterns better than anyone else. So I'm actually quite excited about the possibilities.
Very good input. Very good input. Kavita, you wanted to say something?
Just very similar, just in country, couple of things. So one is, it's excellent. We always start with so much of, optimism, high spirit, but we certainly, always need to remind ourselves that we need to have a mechanism of keeping these newly formed networks warm through a long time. These are long-term commitments. These are not 2 years, 3 years commitment. So that constant reminder to our donors, to funders, to people who are really interested in seeing this segment of therapy grow needs to be mindful of that. And second, I also, while we've been talking about ICMR so often, I need to also just bring in one more information that ICMR is in the effort of establishing phase 1 clinical pharmacology, at least the CPU units in a public institute. And I just know out of it because DNDi, we're also trying to see if whatever support, more intellect support can be provided, because it's extreme. I don't know how Anand managed it, but I know all large pharma companies do that, whether it's Biocon or it's Serum. Everybody does the phase 1 outside, comes back to the country. They save so much of development time. But it is also something we should not make it as a practice over the next few years. This is also we need to address as we go forward.
Absolutely. She's so right.
Completely agree. Thanks, Kavita, for that.
So right.
So I think we are 5 minutes before we close, and I think there are several questions which are there. I'm going to take questions, friends, who are most closest to the research topic, the discussion topic today. So I'm going to pick some of the questions which are there. Let me pick first question. Somebody has said that if we develop, I think Arumugam has said, if we develop novel antibiotics, is there a biobank for microbes or BSL-2, BSL-3 facilities in India that could be used for potency studies? Anybody wants to take it quickly?
Right. There is supposedly a national biorepository. I think it's based out of Pune. Please correct my geography if I'm wrong. Yes, exactly. But yeah, has not been easy to access them. And if anyone is serious about doing research, I speak my mind. I wouldn't waste too much time searching that. But thankfully, in the last 12 months, something very important has happened, ladies and gentlemen. The two big MIC players like JMI and IHMA are now available in India. So the private players are creating repositories of Indian bugs and global bugs, and you can get that tested from here. So if you are serious about getting something done in a reasonable turnaround time, go to these two vendors, the type of vendors we used here. I hope that big repository, the government repository, will be made available to everyone, but we didn't have success.
Correct. Just to add, I think somebody just said that. So this is, in addition to Pune, there is apparently one more national repository at Chandigarh, MTCC.
Oh, okay.
So thank you for that. But also, I would say that what I gather, there's already a hospital-wide small setup which is available in terms of the repositories that they have. And if I'm not wrong, there is also NCDC-wide repositories which are available too. And these are all different collections, and you will have to assess from different parts where those are best available and so on. But I think long story short, these are biobanks available. These might be at different places. There is not one only place. There might be at different places. So you'll have to go and identify which one is the best suited for you. And then, but there are several BSL-2, BSL-3, BSL-3 plus facilities available in India in national labs, which are open. I think you will have to find ways to get those accessible. If there's anybody who needs more information to that, we do have those. we can provide them as well. So I'll move on from that particular questions. I'll go ahead, please.
I think Kavita had a response.
Just wanted
Sorry.
to add, in fact, RCGM has initiated the process of BSL-3 accreditation also. So you will get some more data on a centralized place of all BSL-3 facilities.
Excellent. Yes, yes, very important. So I think those also could be checked in. There is a question on largely to say, I'm just trying to pick very quickly. There's a question saying that, would you like perspectives from panelists on use of bacteriophages to combat AMR? A quick one so that I can go to another question after that. Anybody?
My quick answer is one of the hottest areas within AMR right now is bacteriophage. Right? People are looking at how they can take viruses, which are natural enemies with bacteria, and put it into human. It's a great research, but the regulatory pathways, Taslim and as Kavita would know, are really very, very nascent because it's bespoke, right? Per patient, you almost adjust a cocktail of virus. So we are hoping maybe in the next 15 to 20 years, there'll be much better clarity of how to make an industrial scale bacteriophage. But it's certainly a fascinating area for early research and early AMR. Don't expect quick translation.
Thank you. I'm going to go on to take at least, I'll try to take more questions. There's several questions, so that's very good. And we, and I think we had, a very constant audience as well, guys. So that's very good. A quick question here is that how you can justify, sorry, it moved as I was trying to read, how you can justify data of safety and efficacy from PK/PD studies with respect to pharmacogenetics. I'll repeat again, it may not be best, put together, but how you can justify or how you use possibly data of safety and efficacy from PK/PD with respect to pharmacogenetics.
I wouldn't know that, I'm sorry, but I would certainly say that PK/PDs are not an alternative to safety and efficacy study. They certainly guide the protocol, they guide the dosage, they guide lots of indication, but they do not replace a safety and efficacy study. And I'm sorry, I don't know the whole answer.
And Taslim, she's absolutely right. If there is more interest, they can always speak to Harish or Shahul in our team on PK/PD, but we have never heard the word pharmacogenetics when we do AMR. I must be honest about that. PK/PD, of course, we live and breathe it every day. But if there's any specific question, they can reach out to Harish or Shahul.
I think that's a very good point. So I think that would be one. There are also many questions that we may not be able to take today. So my request to participants is that you can directly write to us on the email that you may have, or you can use amrinfo@ccamp.res.in or amr@ccamp.res.in. So please do write. I'll take one last question that has come in, which says, with regard to trial data, have you ever had an experience of people doubting the veracity of the data collected in India? If so, how do you deal with them? Are you there? Are there any questions with regard to the demographies and variation thereof?
Kavita would like to opine on that.
So there have been times, I'll be honest, there have been times that I'm talking about, when I was young those days, the robustness of Indian data, the integrity has been questioned, but usually they've been found to be site-specific challenges. And it's not that we have seen that, so many of our CROs have been audited, have received a lot of complaints by the FDA, they have received letters. So it's, as a blanket, you will not say that because the data is coming from India, it is not acceptable. There has to be a whole rationale of showing that why do they think the data is not reliable.
If this question was asked to me 5 years ago, Taslim, answer would have been different. Today, in general, there's some better acceptance of the data that were coming from India. I'll be very honest, we have never been questioned on veracity. Of course, we haven't produced clinical data yet in India, but non-clinical data coming from India, we've never been questioned.
So, and Indian sites are a part of many multi-country
multi-site
trials, global trials. And it's not that. So they are just considered as one of these sites where US, Europe, other sites also participate. We are very often, and you've seen CRO industry growth in India in the last few years. Real growth.
In phase 3, right?
Especially phase 3, especially the late clinical trials.
No, I think, and I think as we go forward and the more work gets done here and the harmonization, which kind of weaves into the global data package requirements, I'm sure there is no doubt that it will be built in. I think we have really had a fantastic chat. We have to, the session has to come and wrap up. But if I may summarize very quickly, I think what we discussed today largely both with Anand and Kavita is while the scenario of AMR is absolutely a global challenge, India, because of reasons that we actually have discussed, is a very important player in a global response to AMR. Many, many reasons, prevention, stewardship, but also very importantly, build new innovations to tackle AMR. We didn't go into diagnostic, which is a huge effort, but I think in terms of the therapeutic as well, and the global partnerships in therapeutics development is an important aspect to build those new antibiotics in the strains which are possibly, the superbugs as people call them, which are not possibly around everywhere, and the access to those is an important resource to build a strong national action plan, which enables much more to bring down the larger aspect of what you call it as the effort on AMR. But also last thing that if I may just summarize with is an effort going forward to build a very robust the regulatory pathway to ensure that the developers get easy access to do early clinical studies, early trials, early research, and so on, is a very important part of it. And I think all of us together are working towards this. So I individually, and CCAMP, if I may add, is very optimistic that together we can make better ecosystem for all of us to work in and ensure that those developers can actually get the best access to the resources, environment, funding, something that Anand brought out as well, together. And players like GARDP, other players like CARB-X, Wellcome Trust, Indian government efforts like DBT, ICMR, Health Ministry, and startups like Bugworks and many more, which we all know about, who are some of them are today. We are all in together for this effort and looking forward to do that. I will stop here from my side. A quick any word from Anand or Kavita before we hand it over to Nandita. Thank you.
Kavita ji.
Now let's continue this this investment, Taslim, which you are making of your time and bringing the partners together. This is unbeatable. This is amazing. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And my last thing is for the entrepreneurs here. If you're thinking of doing something in AMR, please consider the next generation spot diagnostics. It'd be wonderful to get a 20-minute spot diagnostics that can exactly say which is the organism and what it's resistant to. It'll help countries like India big time so that we can put the right antibiotic for the right patient. So think diagnostics and prevention as much as you think therapeutics. That's my last word.
Thank you so much, Anand and Kavita.
Wonderful
session and conversation together. Hand you back to Nandita. Thank you.
Thanks. I'll request my colleague Roshan to just close the session.
Thank you, Nandita. It has been a very fantastic panel discussion today, and a wonderful way to kickstart our series of AMR conversation. I would like to thank all the panelists, Dr. Anand, Anandkumar, Dr. Kavita Singh, and Dr. Taslim for giving your time, and special thanks to Dr. Nandita for crafting and planning for the webinar, Dr. Devashni and Tatash for social media support. Thank you all once again, and looking forward to see you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.